A heavy, sickeningly sweet stench. That's the first thing that hit the two officers as they stood on the walkway of a quiet Las Vegas home. They were there to conduct a welfare check on a 68-year-old woman, but the man who answered the door, his smile stretched thin as a wire, his face slick with sweat, told a very different story. Why was her car still in the driveway? Why was the house behind him a cavern of complete darkness? And why, despite the man's flimsy lies, did that awful spoiled smell, masked by the sharp tang of cleaning chemicals, seem to be leaking from the house like a confession? The officers were about to uncover a secret, hidden by desperation and locked away, inside a chest freezer in the garage. This is a chilling story of kindness betrayed, deadly manipulation, and a crime that refused to stay hidden. You won't believe what they found inside. To follow this dark, chilling journey, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell to support the channel. Now, let's get into it. The heat of the November afternoon was a heavy, sticky thing, an unseasonable weight on the shoulders of the two officers. They stood on the walkway of a quiet house in a quiet northeast Las Vegas neighborhood. The silence was deep, broken only by the distant hum of traffic and the rustle of dry palm fronds. Officer Hale, a man whose face was mapped by 20 years of service, lifted his hand and knocked. The sound was solid, final. 3 raps. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police, he called out. His voice not a shout, but a firm statement that carried easily through the thin door. He and his partner, Officer Davies, waited. Davies, younger by 10 years, shifted his weight. You really think she's in there, Hale? Friend hasn't heard from her in over 2 weeks, Davies, Hale said, his eyes scanning the front window. The blinds were drawn tight, a pale, uniform cream color. 68-year-old woman. Cars in the drive. Dogs are quiet. That's a bad combination. Friend said she never leaves the dogs, Davies offered. Exactly. They waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. The silence from inside the house was absolute. Hale was about to raise his hand again when he saw it. The tiny, brass-ringed peephole set into the center of the door went dark. Someone was inside. Someone was watching them. Hale held up a hand to stop Davies from speaking. He addressed the door again, his tone a little sharper, a little more official. Ma'am, this is the police. We're here to conduct a welfare check on Monique Gilbertson. Could you open the door, please? A muffled sound came from within. A voice, but not an old woman's voice. It was male. Just a second. Hold on. There was the distinct sound of a deadbolt sliding back. A solid, heavy thunk. Then, the metallic rattle of a chain. The door opened, but only a sliver. It stopped hard against the brass chain, leaving a gap of perhaps 3 inches. Through that gap, Officer Hale saw one eye, a bright, restless blue, and part of a nervous smile. "Can I help you, officers?" the man's voice asked. It was smooth, almost friendly, but stretched thin, like a wire about to snap. "Sir, we're here for a welfare check on Monique Gilbertson," Hale repeated patiently. "Is she here?" Monique. The man's smile widened, a performance for the narrow gap. "Oh, no, she's not. She's out of town." "Yeah, out of town." Davies stepped forward. Her friend said she was concerned, said she hadn't heard from her. "Oh yeah, no, it was a last-minute thing, an emergency. Family back east, I think." Hale's eyes narrowed. "And who are you, sir?" "Me. Oh, I'm Daniel." The smile faltered for a half-second. "I'm house-sitting, just watching the place while she's gone." As Daniel spoke, a puff of air escaped the dark interior of the house. It rolled past Hale's face, and he recoiled slightly. It was a terrible smell. It was complex, a sickly sweet odor, like fruit left to rot in a plastic bag, but underneath it, something else. Something heavy and spoiled, masked by the sharp tang of cleaning chemicals. "Sir," Hale said, his hand moving to rest on his belt, his thumb near his radio. "We're going to need you to open the door." "Oh, I don't know about that, officer," Daniel said, his charm evaporating. "It's, her house." Private property. I don't think she'd want me just letting strangers in. We're not strangers, sir. We're the police. Her car is in the driveway. Her friends are worried. We need to come inside and verify that she is not here and not in distress. She's not. I told you, she's gone. Daniel's voice rose, cracking with a sudden sharp panic. His bright blue eye vanished from the crack and the door started to move. Do not close this door, sir, Hale commanded, his voice dropping into a register that tolerated no argument. He was faster than Daniel. He put his heavy boot in the gap, blocking the door from shutting. The door slammed against his boot, and Daniel let out a small, trapped sound. Sir, you are obstructing a welfare check. Step back and unlatch this chain. Now. There was a long, terrible pause. The only sound was Daniel's breathing, quick and shallow, from the other side of the wood. The foul, sweet odor seemed to be growing stronger, leaking from the house like a confession. Okay, the voice said, suddenly small and defeated. Okay, don't push. I'm taking it off. The door closed just enough for the chain to go slack. There was a jingle of metal, and then the door swung open slowly. The man who called himself Daniel stood before them. He was 37 years old, dressed in a stained t-shirt and jeans. His hair was matted, his face slick with sweat. His smile was back, a ghastly, tight-lipped expression of pure fear. See, no problem, officers, Daniel said, spreading his hands wide. He was trying to be charming, but his hands were trembling so violently he looked like he was trying to wave away a fly. He took a step to the side, but he did not move back. He stood squarely in the entryway, blocking their path. Behind him, the house was a cavern of complete darkness. No lights were on. All the blinds were down. And from that darkness, the awful, spoiled, chemical-laced smell rushed out to meet them, a physical presence in the hot November air. Daniel's trembling hands were a stark contrast to the aggressive, defensive posture of his body. He held them up, palms out, as if to prove he was harmless, but he remained a solid obstacle in the doorway. The odor from the house, that rotten, chemical-laced sweetness, was a third person in the conversation. Look, I told you, officers. She's not here, Daniel repeated. His voice was a high-tension wire, vibrating with a forced, thin reason. I swear. She's on the East Coast. Officer Hale, his boot still planted firmly, did not move. His gaze was fixed on the man. You said house-sitting, Mr. Rue. Daniel Rue. Mr. Rue, you said you're house-sitting. How do you contact Monique if there's an emergency? A flicker of panic in those bright, restless eyes. I call her. On her cell phone. Call her now. Officer Davies said, his voice flat. He stepped up beside Hale. I can't, Daniel said too quickly. She lost it. Her phone. She told me she lost it. She's using a friend's phone. She called me yesterday. Told me not to worry. From what number? Hale asked, his patience wearing dangerously thin. I don't know. It was a blocked number. No caller. ID thing. You know how it is. Hale and Davies exchanged a look. The lie was flimsy, pathetic. It was the story of a man who was not used to being questioned by people he could not charm. You're scaring him. The voice was a whisper, but it cut through the tense standoff like a blade. It came from the absolute darkness behind Daniel's shoulder. It was female, young, and saturated with terror. Daniel flinched violently, a full-body reaction, as if he had been struck. He shut his eyes for a single second, his face contorting in pure, unadulterated fury. Baby, go back to bed, he hissed over his shoulder, his voice dropping to a low growl. It's nothing. Just go back. Sir, Officer Hale said, his voice rising, projecting past Daniel into the unseen space. Who else is in this house with you? It's just my wife. She's not well. You're upsetting her. Daniel was frantic now, turning his head back and forth between the officers and the darkness. Ma'am, Hale called out, please step forward into the light. A shape detached itself from the gloom. It was a woman, much younger than Daniel, perhaps in her late 20s. She was painfully thin, her pale skin almost luminous in the dim light of the doorway. She was wearing a thin robe, and she clutched it at her throat with a hand that was all bone and knuckle. Her eyes were enormous, dark, and fixed entirely on Daniel, watching him for a cue, for permission to breathe. "Ma'am, what's your name?" Hale asked, softening his tone. The woman did not answer. Her gaze was locked on Daniel. He turned his head to look at her, and the expression he gave her was not a loving one. It was a command, a threat. "Her name is Gina," Daniel said for her, his teeth nearly clenched. "She's my wife. Now, I've told you. We're here. Monique's not. You have no reason. We're renting," Gina suddenly whispered. The words hung in the air, heavy and disastrous. Daniel's head snapped back to her. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy, gray pallor. His house-sitting story, his entire performance, had just been completely demolished by a single, whispered word. "You're renting." Officer Davies pounced, his voice sharp. He said he was house-sitting. "Which one is it?" Gina's eyes widened. She saw her mistake. She looked at Daniel, a look of pure, agonizing apology. I mean, it's both," she stammered, trying to rewind the moment. We pay rent to house sit." Daniel put his head down, his shoulders slumping. He had been betrayed, not by a stranger, but by his own partner. The toxic, shared secret between them was suddenly visible, pulsing in the air. Hale saw it clearly. He saw the control Daniel had over her, and the terrified, desperate way she had just tried to help him, and in doing so, had destroyed their fragile story. They were not a normal couple. They were two people bound together in something dark, something that lived in that foul-smelling house. "Okay," Hale said, his voice final. "We're done talking." He looked past Daniel, past the terrified woman, into the dark, silent house. "We're coming in, now." The feeling, 3 months earlier, had been loneliness. It was not a sharp, sudden pain, but a dull, constant ache. A quiet that had settled over Monique Gilbertson's life like dust. 10 years. It had been 10 years since her husband's passing. 10 years of a house that was too large, too silent. Her 68 years felt like 100. She was wealthy, yes, but that wealth only served to build higher, more secure walls around her solitude. She was out that evening, a rare indulgence. She had driven herself to a nice establishment, one of the few places she felt invisible enough to be comfortable, yet surrounded by the murmur of human life. She was trying, in her quiet way, to feel like a part of the world. A voice, smooth and unexpected, cut through her private thoughts. "Pardon me, I truly hope I'm not intruding." She startled, looking up. A man. He was standing near her, his expression one of polite concern. He was much younger, 37 perhaps. He was not the sort of person who ever spoke to her. "Oh," she said, her voice a little rough from disuse. "No, not at all." "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the empty seat. She was so surprised. She simply nodded. He sat down. "My name is Daniel," he said. He did not offer a hand, but simply met her gaze. His eyes were intense. "Monique," she replied, feeling suddenly and strangely self-conscious. "That's a beautiful name," he said, and his voice was so sincere, a warmth bloomed in her chest. "I noticed you from over there. You have a very kind face. It's a rare thing in this city." She felt a blush rise to her cheeks, a feeling she hadn't experienced in decades. "Oh, well, that's very kind of you to say. It's just the truth." He looked away for a moment, as if gathering his own thoughts. "I'm sorry. I'm having a difficult time, and seeing someone who looked genuinely good. I felt like I had to say something. This was not a flirtation. It felt different. It felt, she thought, like a confession. A difficult time. she asked, her natural instinct for kindness overriding her suspicion. He sighed. He told her his story. He was an artist, he said. He had come to Las Vegas with a promise of a gallery showing a new start. He was good with his hands, he said. He could build and fix anything. But the contact he had, the man who had promised him everything, had vanished. He was stranded. My wallet, my tools. Everything was in my car, he said, his voice lowering to a near whisper. It was taken. 2 days ago. I've been on the street. He was not asking for money. That was the most important part. He looked embarrassed, ashamed. I'm not looking for a handout, Monique, he said, using her name. It sounded personal, intimate. I don't know. I needed to tell someone. To talk to a kind person for 1 minute before I don't know what. She looked at him. He wasn't just a boy. He was a man in trouble, and he was right. He did not look like the other people here. He looked lost. She felt a powerful, maternal urge to help. But it was mixed with something else. That warmth. The feeling of his focused attention. It was not just maternal. It was the feeling of being seen. Not as an old woman, not as a widow, but as a person. They talked for over an hour. He asked about her. He listened. He listened in a way no one had in 10 years. He made her feel, for 1 hour, interesting. He made her feel alive. The words were out of her mouth before she had even truly formed the thought. I have a guest room. He stopped. I beg your pardon. I have a guest room, she repeated, her voice stronger now. She was a woman of means, after all. It's empty. It just sits there. He protested immediately. Oh, no. Monique, I couldn't. I just met you. I'm a stranger, and I need help around the house, she continued, the idea solidifying, growing. I have odd jobs, a loose railing on the porch, a dripping faucet. You said you were good with your hands. I am, he said, his voice low. You could work. In exchange for the room, she offered. Just for a little while. Just until you can get back on your feet. A long, profound silence stretched between them. He looked at her, and his gaze was full of a deep, practiced gratitude, a relief so profound it felt almost like devotion. You would do that, he whispered. For someone like me. Yes, Monique said, and she smiled. She felt a lightness she hadn't felt in a decade. We're not strangers anymore, are we, Daniel? The first week was, for Monique, a quiet revelation. The house was no longer silent. Daniel was a perfect guest. He was an early riser, and she would come downstairs to find the coffee already brewed, a faint, pleasant scent of his soap in the air. He insisted on working. The loose railing on the porch was not only fixed but sanded and restained. The dripping faucet in the guest bathroom was silenced. He was deferential, charming, and full of stories. He would join her for dinner, and he would listen, his intense gaze fixed on her, making her feel as though every word she said was fascinating. He was, she thought, the son she had never had, a companion. Her act of kindness, it seemed, had been a gift to herself as well. The loneliness had receded, pushed back by his polite, warm energy. Then, 6 days after his arrival, she came home from the grocery store. There was a woman sitting on her front steps. She was young, very young, with a thin, bird-like quality. Her dark hair was tangled, and she sat with her knees drawn up to her chest, her arms wrapped around them, as if she were trying to make herself as small as possible. She looked up as Monique's car pulled into the drive, her eyes wide and dark, like a startled deer. Monique got out of her car, confused. "Hello," she called out. The woman did not speak. She just watched, her entire body tensed. Before Monique could take another step, the front door opened, and Daniel was there. He stopped short when he saw Monique, his face a mask of sudden, profound stress. "Monique," he said, his voice strained. "You're home early." "Daniel." "Who is this?" Monique asked, gesturing with a grocery bag. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. He looked, for the first time, not charming. He looked cornered. He walked down the steps and put a hand on the young woman's shoulder. She flinched, but then leaned into his touch. "Monique," he said, his voice dropping low, adopting that sincere, confessional tone she recognized. This is Gina. She's my sister, my younger sister." Monique looked from him to the girl. She was 28, as she would later learn, but she looked like a teenager, lost and broken. "Daniel," Monique said, her voice firming, "we did not discuss this." I know, he said, stepping toward her, effectively blocking her path to the house, keeping the conversation in the driveway. He was protecting Gina, or perhaps hiding her. "I am so sorry. I didn't know where else to take her. She just showed up." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She's in trouble, Monique. Real trouble. She just left a terrible situation. A man. He wasn't good to her. She has nowhere else to go. I'm all she has in the world." Monique looked at the young woman, who was now watching them with a raw, desperate intensity. Monique's heart, her soft, practiced, foolish heart, went out to her. But her mind was screaming. This was an invasion. This was not the agreement. "Daniel, this is my home," she said, her voice quiet but strained. I can't take in everyone. Just for a few days," he pleaded. His hand brushed her arm, a familiar, warm gesture. "Please, just for a few days. I swear. Just until I can get her sorted out, find her a safe place to stay. She's not well. Please, Monique, don't make me send her back out there." She stood there, trapped between her ingrained kindness and the loud, clanging alarm bell in her head. She looked at the woman's desperate, dark eyes. She looked at Daniel's pleading, handsome face. "A few days," Monique said, and her voice was thin. "That is all." "Thank you," Daniel breathed, his relief so profound it was like a physical wave. "Thank you. You are a saint. You won't even know she's here." But that was the first lie. That night, the house changed. The peace shattered. Daniel, who had been her companion, was now part of a pair. He and Gina were a closed circle, a separate, whispered unit within Monique's home. They stayed in the guest room, the door firmly shut. Monique was trying to read in the living room when she heard the voices. At first, it was just a murmur. Then, the sound grew. It was an argument, but a whispered one, a high-pressure, sibilant fight. "She heard you promised, and what did you expect, and where else can we go?" The words were hissed, full of a shared, desperate history. Monique froze, the book forgotten in her lap. She felt like an intruder in her own home. The anger from the guest room was a poison, seeping into the quiet air. Then, just as suddenly as it had erupted, the anger stopped. A thick, heavy silence fell over the house. It was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence of a held breath. Monique sat for a long time, her nerves frayed. Later, long after she had gone to her own bed, she heard another sound. It was from the guest room. It was a low, soft laugh, a woman's laugh. It was followed by a low, rhythmic, intimate murmuring. It was not the sound of a brother comforting his troubled younger sister. Monique lay awake in the dark, her eyes wide, the blood in her veins turning cold. The storm she had invited in was not just Daniel, it was the two of them, and they were not what they seemed. Daniel's world was collapsing in the 3-inch gap of the doorway. Officer Hale's voice was a low, steady force. "We're coming in. Now." You can't," Daniel stammered, his body still a useless, trembling barricade. "You don't have a warrant. This is our home. We pay rent." He latched onto Gina's lie, his voice desperate to make it true. "You're obstructing," Officer Davies said, his tone devoid of any patience. "That's a crime. We have 2 conflicting stories, a missing woman and a car in the driveway. You have about 2 seconds to step aside." Daniel's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. His bright, restless eyes darted to Gina, who had shrunk back, her face a mask of pure, childlike terror. She was useless. He was alone. Officers. Officers. Thank God. The voice was new. It was high, sharp, and frantic, coming from the walkway behind them. All 4 people at the door, the 2 officers, Daniel and Gina, turned their heads. A woman in her late 60s, her face pale and lined with worry, was power walking toward them, a phone clutched in her hand. "That's her car," the woman cried, pointing at the vehicle in the driveway. "She's here, isn't she? Oh, thank God, did you find her? Monique. She tried to push past the officers, her eyes fixed on the dark, open door. Officer Hale gently, but firmly, put out an arm, stopping her. "Ma'am, please. Who are you?" "I'm Karen. I'm her friend. I'm the one who called you. Is she?" Her eyes focused on the doorway. She saw Daniel. She saw Gina. Her frantic energy vanished, replaced by a cold, sudden confusion. Her gaze locked onto Daniel. Who are you?" Karen asked, her voice dropping. Hale looked at Daniel. "This is Daniel Rue, ma'am. He says he's renting the house." Karen's face contorted in a way that was almost a snarl. "Renting? No, he is not. Monique would never. She. Oh my God." Her eyes went wide. She was looking at Daniel, but seeing someone else, a memory. You're the house sitter." Daniel went pale. This woman, this stranger, knew. "Ma'am," Hale said, turning his full attention to her. "What do you know about this?" "I know," Karen said, her voice shaking with a sudden, dawning rage, "that Monique would never, ever leave her dogs. Not for 1 hour. Not for 1 minute. Where are her dogs?" "They're inside," Daniel said quickly. "They're fine. I'm taking care of them." "He's lying," Karen almost shrieked. She was scared of him. "She told me." "Scared of him," Davies repeated, pulling out a small notepad. "Yes, she called me. It must have been just over 2 weeks ago." She was distraught. She was crying. She said she had made a terrible mistake. She let this man, this artist, stay in her house to be kind. Daniel's face was a ghastly white. She's delirious. I've never seen this woman in my life." "Quiet," Hale commanded Daniel. He looked at Karen. "Ma'am, what was she scared of?" "He was stealing from her," Karen said, the words tumbling out. "Little things at first. Cash from her purse. She thought she was going crazy, forgetting where she put things. Then, a pair of her late husband's cufflinks. Then, her jewelry. A bracelet she always wore. She was mistaken," Daniel tried, but his voice was a weak whisper. Karen ignored him, her eyes burning. But that wasn't the worst of it. He brought her. She pointed a trembling finger at Gina, who flinched and hid behind Daniel's shoulder. He told Monique it was his sister. Karen's voice dripped with venom. His sister. Monique heard them. She heard them through the walls. At night, she was so embarrassed, so horrified, she said. She said she felt unclean in her own home. She said she was going to make them leave. A dead, heavy silence fell. Daniel's lie about house-sitting was gone. His lie about renting was gone. And now, his lie about Gina being his sister was gone, exposed on the front step by this furious, terrified friend. And there was one more thing, Karen said, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper that chilled the officers more than her shouting. The prescription pads, that's what really, truly scared her. What pads? Hale asked. Her husband. Monique's husband. He was a doctor. He passed away 10 years ago, but his old office was still in the house, full of old books, old equipment, and his old blank prescription pads. She found Daniel in that office. He said he was just looking around, but she knew. The next day, she looked. A stack of the pads. Gone. Karen was crying now, tears streaming down her face. She was going to call the police. She told me, and that was the last time I ever spoke to her. The confession hung in the hot, still air, mixing with the sweet, spoiled smell from the house. Officer Hale looked at Daniel. The man's face was no longer charming, no longer panicked. It was empty. It was the face of a man who had no more stories to tell. Hale put his hand on Daniel's shoulder, his grip firm, immovable. "Mr. Rue, you and your wife, you are going to step outside, onto the lawn. Now." It was not a request. It was the sound of the end. The few days had become a fiction. First, it had been 1 week. Then, 2. Gina, the silent, bird-like creature, was still there. She remained in the guest room, a ghost in the hallways, her presence a constant, low-grade fever in Monique's home. The sounds from their room continued, the sharp, sibilant whispers of arguments, so full of venom and shared history, would be followed hours later by the soft, rhythmic murmuring of reconciliation, sounds that made Monique feel like a cold, peripheral intruder. Suspicion was a seed that had taken root and was now growing, thorny and invasive, in her mind. It was not just their presence. It was the small, unsettling disappearances. It began with a bottle of her favorite perfume, an expensive gift from her late husband. She assumed she had misplaced it. Then, a $20 bill she was certain she had left on the kitchen counter was simply gone. She accused her own memory. At 68, she thought, perhaps she was becoming forgetful. But then, she had gone to her jewelry box for a simple silver bracelet, a piece she wore almost daily. It was not there. That was when the cold, hard certainty replaced the fog of self-doubt. She was not forgetful. She was being stolen from. She found Daniel alone. This was a rarity. He was in her late husband's office, the room he had been found in before, simply looking at the books on the shelves. "Daniel," he turned, and his smile was instant, brilliant, and warm. "Monique, I was just admiring this collection. Your husband was a very intelligent man. We need to talk," she said. Her voice did not tremble. She was proud of that. The smile on his face did not vanish, but it tightened at the edges. He became very still. "Of course. Is something wrong?" Your sister, Daniel, Gina." Monique put a slight sharp emphasis on the word sister. "She is still here. You said a few days. It has been over 2 weeks. He sighed, a deep theatrical sound of a man burdened. "I know. I am so sorry. She is more fragile than I realized." That man, he truly broke her spirit. "And things," Monique continued, her resolve hardening. "Things in my house, they have gone missing." "There," it was said. The air in the room became thick, heavy. Daniel did not react as she expected. There was no anger, no denial. Instead, his face crumpled, an expression of such profound, agonizing hurt that she was the one who felt, for a horrible, confusing second, that she had done something wrong. "Missing," he whispered. He took a step toward her. "Monique, what do you mean, missing?" "I mean stolen, Daniel." He stopped, as if she had physically struck him. You are accusing me?" he asked. His voice was not the voice of a liar. It was the voice of a devoted friend who had been betrayed. She began, but her certainty was faltering under the weight of his wounded gaze. After everything," he said, his voice low and pained. "You took me in. You saved me. I thought we were friends, Monique. I thought you saw me." He was moving again, slowly, closing the distance between them. She held her ground, but she felt her anger dissolving, being replaced by a terrible, unwelcome confusion. I fixed your railing," he said, his voice soft, intimate. "I silenced that faucet that was driving you mad. I've done everything I can, with my own 2 hands, to repay your kindness." He was in front of her now. He was much taller than she was. He did not seem threatening, only sad. "Do you really think," he whispered, "that I am the kind of man who would take from you?" And then he did it. He reached out and, with a gentleness that was shocking, he took her hand. His own was warm, strong. "Look at me, Monique," he commanded, though his voice was a plea. She met his eyes. They were intense, mesmerizing, the same eyes that had drawn her in at the bar. "I have nothing," he said. "Gina and I, we have nothing but what you've given us. Your home, your kindness." He brought his other hand up, not to her hand, but to her arm, his fingers resting on her skin, just above the elbow. His touch was light, but it burned. It was not a violent touch, not an aggressive one. It was personal. It was a touch that crossed a line, a touch that was not appropriate, and it sent a wave of profound, dizzying confusion through her. You're a wonderful woman, Monique," he said, his voice a low vibration that she felt more than heard. "A truly beautiful, generous woman. The idea that I would cause you even one moment of pain." He was making her feel. He was making her feel seen again. He was not just a house guest. He was a man. And he was making her feel like a woman, not an old, forgetful widow. She was ashamed. She pulled her arm away, her face hot. The gesture of his touch had completely derailed her. She was no longer an accuser. She was a flustered, embarrassed old woman. She stammered, looking away from his intense, consuming gaze. I must have been mistaken. I'm very tired. I've been confused lately." She had betrayed herself. The words were a surrender. A slow, beatific smile spread across Daniel's face. It was not a smile of triumph. It was a smile of pure, saintly forgiveness. "It's okay," he said, his voice warm again. "All the hurt gone. This is a big, empty house. You're allowed to be stressed. You're allowed to be forgetful. I understand." He stepped back, giving her space. A perfect gentleman. Let me make you some tea," he offered, his charm completely restored. "That special herbal blend you like. To help you calm down." She nodded, unable to speak, and fled the room. She retreated to her own bedroom, her heart pounding, her skin still tingling where he had touched her. She felt foolish, humiliated, and deeply, deeply confused. She had gone in there to accuse a thief, and had left feeling like she was the one who needed to apologize. The charm offensive had been a total, devastating success. Gina was not in the guest room. She had been standing in the shadows of the main hallway. She was a creature of shadows, of small spaces, of listening at doors. She had watched the entire performance. She had seen Daniel turn, his face a mask of brilliant, calculated warmth. She had heard him deploy the voice, the one that was all soft edges and deep sincerity, the one he had used on her so long ago, in another city, in another life. But it was not the words that mattered. It was the touch. She had seen him reach out. She had seen his hand, strong and tanned, settle on the old woman's pale, spotted arm. She had seen the way his thumb rested, just so, in a gesture that was not merely polite, but proprietary. Possessive, intimate. It was an artist's touch, a sculptor's, claiming his material. When Monique had fled, her face flushed. Daniel remained in the office for a long moment. He did not move. He was smiling, a slow, satisfied smile, not of warmth, but of victory. Gina had retreated then, silent as smoke, back to the guest room that felt, every day, more like a cage. When he entered, he was still wearing that smile. He closed the door, the sound of the latch clicking into place, echoing the sound of a trap snapping shut. "It's handled," he said, his voice casual. He began unbuttoning the cuffs of his shirt, as if he had just concluded a difficult day of work. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists in her lap. "It's handled," she repeated. Her voice was flat, dead. Yes. He looked at her, his smile finally fading, sensing the coldness in the room. She was getting suspicious. The bracelet, the prescription pads. I calmed her down. She thinks she's going crazy. He was waiting for praise. He was waiting for her relief. You touched her, Gina said. Daniel stopped. He stared at her. What? You touched her. She enunciated every word as if it were a piece of broken glass in her mouth. You put your hand on her arm. A look of profound, weary annoyance crossed Daniel's face. And I was charming her, Gina. It's the game. It's what I do. You know this. No, she whispered, her voice a low, dangerous hiss. She stood up, a sudden uncoiling motion. That is not the game. The game is getting the money. The game is taking the house. The game is not that. What are you talking about? He demanded, his voice rising. That look you gave her. Gina shot back, her voice still a whisper, which made it all the more violent. The wounded look. The I'm just a lost soul look. That's our look. That's the one you used on me. He was speechless. She was right. You're not supposed to use that on them, she hissed, her eyes filling with a hot, furious, jealous venom. You're not supposed to enjoy it. Enjoy it, he scoffed, taking a step toward her. Enjoy what? Touching that old, dry. Are you insane? I'm working. I'm keeping us off the street. I am keeping you safe. Away from. You're going soft. She cut him off. The words were a slap. I've seen it. The way you talk to her. The way you bring her tea. You like it. You like being her pet. In a single, fluid motion, his charm vanished, replaced by the cold, hard man she knew was underneath. He crossed the space between them and his hand shot out, not to her arm, but to her throat. He did not squeeze. He simply held her, his fingers cold against her skin, his thumb resting just under her jaw, a mirror of the touch he had given Monique. But this one was not intimate. It was a threat. Do not, he said, his voice a low, guttural growl. Ever. Say that again. She did not flinch. She met his gaze. This was their language. This was the heat she understood. This house, this mark, is the easiest one we have ever had, he said, his eyes boring into hers. She is a lonely, pathetic, childless old woman who is desperate for a kind word. She wants me to touch her arm. She wants me to be the son she never had. And I will be. I will be whatever she wants. I will bring her tea, and I will fix her faucets, and I will hold her wrinkled hand until she signs this entire house over to me, to us. He let go of her throat, a dismissive gesture, as if dropping a piece of trash. You are jealous of her, he scoffed. You are jealous of a walking corpse. Get a grip. You're forgetting the plan. You're forgetting what we are. He turned away from her, disgusted. Gina stood there, her throat burning, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She was not jealous of Monique. She was terrified of the effort Daniel was putting in, the way he was slipping into the role, the way the line between the performance and the man was beginning, just slightly, to blur. I'm not, she whispered to his back. I'm not forgetting. Good, he said, without turning around. Because she's starting to get on my nerves, too. She's starting to ask too many questions. Your little sister act is wearing thin. We are running out of time. The feeling of his touch on her arm had not faded. It had curdled. Monique had spent the night in a state of agitated, profound shame. The confusion Daniel had so expertly planted had, upon reflection, blossomed into a cold, hard rage. He had not touched her arm as a son would. He had touched her as a man. It had been a calculated, appallingly intimate gesture designed to fluster and silence her. It was a performance. And the realization that she had fallen for it, that she had stammered and retreated, filled her with a humiliation so deep it was almost a physical sickness. He and his wife. They were not just thieves. They were performers. They were parasites. And she, in her loneliness, had unlocked the door and invited them in to feed. She was 68 years old, not a child. She was the mistress of this house. She had allowed this. Now she would end it. She did not wait for them to wake. She went to the guest room door. She did not knock. She pounded, her fist connecting with the solid wood. The door flew open. Daniel stood there, his hair wild, his eyes full of sleep and sudden, animal alarm. Gina, pale and small, cowered behind him in the bed. "Monique," Daniel said, his voice rough. He was already trying to assemble his charm, to put the mask on. "What? What time is it? Is something wrong? Get dressed," Monique commanded. Her voice was not the voice of a confused old woman. It was iron. "Both of you, meet me in the living room. Now." She turned and walked away. She did not look back. She was waiting for them. When they appeared, they were dressed, but they looked like refugees. Daniel had put on his performance face. He looked concerned, caring. Gina just looked terrified. "Monique, you're frightening us," Daniel began, his voice a soft, velvet coo. I was just about to make you some tea, that special blend." "No," Monique said, cutting him off. The word was a blade. "No more tea. No more of this." Daniel stopped. The charm faltered, the smile freezing on his face. "I want you gone," she said. The silence that followed was absolute. Gina made a small sound, like a strangled bird. Daniel just stared, his mask of charm cracking, revealing the cold, hard man beneath. "Monique," he said, and his voice was different now, losing its soft edges. "What are you talking about? After our conversation yesterday, I thought we had an understanding." "We did," she said, her gaze unwavering. "I understood perfectly. I understood that you think I am a foolish, forgetful old woman. I understood that you would touch me and lie to me and manage me. I am not a fool, Daniel, and I am not your mark." "Now wait," he said, taking a step forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "You are twisting this. You're upset. Gina, tell her, we appreciate." "I want you out of my house," Monique repeated, her voice rising, clear and strong. "Both of you, today, today." Daniel's voice was a squeak. The panic was real now. All performance gone. "Today, Monique, you can't. We have nowhere to go. Gina is not well. You can't just throw us on the street." "I can," Monique said, "and I will." "Please," he tried, one last, desperate attempt at pity. Just a few more days. Give us a week. Just 1 week, to get our things, to find a place." Monique looked at his desperate, pleading face, and she made her fatal, final mistake. She compromised. Her kindness, even now, was a fatal flaw. "1 week," she said, her voice hard. "You have 1 week, that is all." She watched his face. The desperation did not vanish, but it was joined by something else, a flicker, a cold calculation. "And I am changing the locks in 1 week," she continued, trying to re-establish her authority. "And I am still considering what to do about my missing jewelry. And the prescription pads. Do you understand me?" She had done it. She had not just given them a deadline, she had given them a threat. Daniel did not plead anymore. His face went very still. The charm was gone. The panic was gone. He looked empty. "Yes, Monique," he said, his voice a quiet, hollow thing. "We understand. 1 week." "Good," she said. She stood up, her body trembling now that the confrontation was over. "Good." She turned and walked away from them, retreating to the safety of her own room, her heart pounding. She felt terrified, but she also felt free. In the living room, Daniel did not move for a full minute. "1 week," Gina whispered, her voice shaking. She's calling the police. She said it. She's going to ruin us, Daniel. We have to run. We have to go. Now." Daniel turned, very, very slowly, and looked at her. His face was a thing of stone. "Run," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Run, where, Gina? Back to the street, back to him. No, we are not running." He walked, stiff-legged, toward the hallway. "Go to the room," he commanded. "But Daniel, go to the room now." The fight was not loud this time. It was not a passionate, sibilant argument. It was a terrifying, quiet strategy session. The door was locked. "She means it, Daniel," Gina whispered, her body trembling. She was not confused. She was strong. "She's strong," Daniel said, his back to her. He was staring at the wall. "She's strong, and she's rich, and she's alone, and she just told us her entire plan. Her plan is to call the police." Gina's voice was rising to a hysterical squeak. "Her plan," Daniel said, turning to face her, his eyes cold and dark, "is to wait 1 week. She gave us time, Gina. She gave us time to think." "To think about what? How to pack?" "No," Daniel said. He walked over to his duffel bag, the one that had been in the closet since he arrived. He knelt down. From the bottom, he pulled a small locked metal kit. The kit, she knew, contained his art supplies. "She won't let us stay," Gina whispered, her eyes fixed on the box. Daniel placed the box on the bed between them. He looked up, and his face was devoid of all heat, all charm, all life. It was the face of a planner. "Then," he replied, his voice a flat, dead calm, "we'll have to find a way to make her." The 2 days that followed the confrontation were a cold, silent war. The house, once filled with Monique's quiet routines, was now a territory of avoidance. She stayed in her bedroom, the door locked. When she emerged for coffee, Daniel and Gina would vanish, retreating to their own room like cockroaches fleeing the light. The air was thick, static, and heavy with the unspoken countdown. 1 week. On the evening of the second day, Gina was sitting on their bed, her entire body shaking. "We should pack," she whispered. We have 5 days left. We should just go." Daniel was not packing. He was standing at the window, staring out at the darkening street, though the blinds were drawn. He had been still for a very long time. "Go where, Gina?" he asked, his voice a dead, flat monotone. Where do we go?" "She's going to call them." "The pads." She said it. "She's not just kicking us out. She's burying us." "So what?" Gina's voice was a thin wail. What's the plan, Daniel?" You said you had a plan." He turned, very slowly. His face was not the face she knew. The charm was gone, the heat, the anger, all of it. He was a creature of cold, empty calculation. "The plan," he said, "is that she can't call anyone." He moved to his bag and retrieved the small, locked metal kit. He placed it on the bed between them. Gina recoiled, as if the box itself were venomous. "No," she breathed. "No, Daniel. Not that." "She's old," he said, his voice a clinical, detached whisper. She's confused. She has an accident. She gets her medications mixed up. It's a tragedy. But we tried to help her. I'm saving us," he hissed, his control finally breaking, a flash of the old, desperate heat returning, "the way I always do. Now, be quiet. Stay here." "Where are you going?" she asked, her eyes wide. "To make a peace offering," he said, and the ghastly, hollow smile that spread across his face was more terrifying than any rage. He took the kit. He went to the kitchen. He was meticulous. He filled the kettle. He took down the tin of Monique's favorite herbal tea, the one he had offered her before. He placed a single cup and saucer on the counter. While the kettle hissed, he opened the metal box. Inside were not art supplies. Inside were vials and powders and implements. Gina had appeared in the doorway, a silent, terrified shadow, watching him. He took a small, dark vial. He unscrewed the cap. "Daniel, please," Gina whispered from the shadows. Let's just go. Please. I'm begging you." He did not look at her. He held the vial over the empty, dry teacup. 3 drops, he said, as if to himself. 1, for the jewelry. 2, for the pads. And 3, for the disrespect. He tilted his hand. 3 dark, viscous drops fell into the bottom of the cup, invisible against the porcelain. He put the vial away. He locked the box. The kettle whistled. He poured the boiling water over the tea bag, the dark liquid swirling and obscuring the drops instantly. He let it steep. He added a small spoonful of honey, just as she liked it. He put the cup on the saucer. He turned, and he looked at Gina. His face was reassembled. He was Daniel again. The charming, wounded, gentle man. She can't be mad at us if we're apologizing, he said softly, as if it were the most reasonable thought in the world. He picked up the tray. "Go back to the room, baby. I will handle this." Gina did not move. She just watched, her breathing shallow, her body frozen, as he walked past her. He found Monique in the living room. She was not reading. She was just sitting in her chair, in the dark, staring at the empty fireplace. She startled when she saw him, her hand flying to her chest. "Monique," he said, his voice a masterpiece of gentle, wounded apology. I told you," she stammered, her voice a mix of fear and her old authority. 1 week. I know, he said, stopping a safe distance away. "And we'll be gone. I swear it on my life. I couldn't bear for it to end like this. With you hating me." He took a small step forward, holding the cup out. I made you your tea, the special blend, as a final apology for everything, for not being who you thought I was. She stared at the cup. She was wary. Her eyes were sharp, suspicious. "I'm not," he said, his voice breaking. A masterful performance. "I'm not a monster, Monique. I'm just a stupid, desperate man. Please, it's just tea. I want us to part, not as enemies. Please." He had given her back the power. He was the supplicant. He was the one who was apologizing. She had won. Her shoulders, which had been tense and high, relaxed slightly. She looked at his face, so full of theatrical regret, and her own decency betrayed her. "Daniel," she said, her voice tired, resigned. She took the cup. You didn't have to do this." "I did," he whispered. I'll leave you to it." He backed away, but he did not leave. He stopped in the shadows of the hallway, next to where Gina was hiding, and he watched. Monique looked at the tea. She sighed, a long, weary sigh. She lifted the cup to her lips and took a sip. She paused. It tastes different," she said, frowning into the cup. "Bitter." From the shadows, Daniel's voice, smooth as oil, replied, "It's just the herbs, Monique. They must get stronger at the bottom of the tin." She seemed to accept this. She took another, deeper drink. I'm very tired," she said, a moment later. I think. I'll go to bed." She tried to stand, but her legs were not working. A look of profound, sudden confusion crossed her face. I feel. "You're just stressed," Daniel said, emerging from the shadows, his voice full of a terrible, false concern. The confrontation. It's taken a lot out of you. Here." He was at her side, his hand on her arm. "Here. Let me help you. Lean on me." She was too dizzy to protest. She slumped against him. "That's it," he whispered, his voice a soothing, terrible lullaby. You're just very, very tired. We're going to help you. We're going to take care of you. Just rest." He was strong. He held her weight easily. He began to walk her, slowly, out of the living room, down the long, dark hall toward her bedroom. Gina watched, her hand over her own mouth, her body shaking, as Daniel, the ever-helpful, charming guest, helped Monique to her final rest. He closed her bedroom door. The click of the latch was the loudest sound in the world. Daniel stood in the hallway for a full minute, his body rigid, listening. The house was silent. It was not the quiet of a peaceful night. It was the absolute, heavy, vacuum-sealed silence of an ending. He turned. Gina was exactly where he had left her, a statue of terror in the dim hallway, her hand still clamped over her mouth. Her eyes were enormous, dark, and fixed on him, not as a woman looks at a man, but as a trapped animal looks at its captor. Is she? Gina's voice was a dry, rasping sound, a single, terrified croak. "She's resting," Daniel said. His voice was hollow, stripped of all emotion, all charm. It was the voice of a machine that had just completed a task. He began to walk toward the living room, his legs stiff. Gina did not follow. She remained frozen, as if her feet had been nailed to the floor. "Daniel," she whispered. "Daniel, what? What did you do?" He stopped, but he did not turn around. "I did what was necessary. We have to. We have to call someone," she stammered, the words tumbling out in a frantic, hysterical rush. "An ambulance. We have to. We can say. We can say she was. She was confused. She fell. She hit her head. We found her." "Be quiet," he said, his voice a low, cold command. "No, you don't understand." Gina was crying now, silent, hot tears streaming down her face. We have to. They can help her. Maybe she's not." He turned around then, and he crossed the space between them in 2 long, silent strides. His movement was so fast, so predatory, that she cried out, a small, choked sound. He grabbed her, not by the arms, but by the shoulders, his fingers digging into her thin frame. "Stop talking," he hissed, his face inches from hers. The man she knew, the charming, desperate, sometimes cruel Daniel, was gone. This person was a stranger, a thing of ice and wire. There is no helping her. There is no ambulance. There is no "we found her." "Do you understand me?" I. "You will be quiet," he commanded, his voice a sibilant, violent whisper. You will pull yourself together. Or I will. I will put you right next to her." The threat was so blunt, so devoid of heat, that it stopped her tears instantly. She was paralyzed by pure, cold fear. "That's better," he said, his grip not relaxing. "Now, you need to listen. You need to think. This is the most important night of our lives." He let go of her, a dismissive shove. He turned away and began to pace, his hands clasped behind his back. He was not panicked. He was working. He was solving a problem. We can't just leave her there," Gina whispered, her voice trembling. But her hysteria was gone, replaced by a catatonic shock. "Of course not," he said, pacing. We can't leave. At all." "What?" "The house," he said, as if explaining something to a very stupid child. "The house is ours. The car. The money. It's all here. We run. Where? With what? They'll find her. Eventually. The friend. Karen. She'll call again. She'll tell them about us. The artist. The sister. They'll look for us. We'll be caught in a day. So what? What do we stay," he said. He stopped pacing. He looked at her. We stay. This is our home now. We're house-sitting. Just like I said. We're renting, just like you said. We're both right. But Gina's eyes darted down the dark hallway toward the locked bedroom door. But her. "She can't be here," he said, his voice flat. She left. Just like I told the police. She left. On an emergency trip. She went to see her brother on the East Coast. She's in the bedroom. Daniel. Not for long, he said. A new, more profound horror dawned on Gina's face. What are you? We have to move her, he stated, as if he were discussing moving a piece of furniture. We can't let her be found. Not ever. He looked around the living room. His eyes were scanning, calculating. Not the yard. They might dig. Not the car. We can't risk driving. It has to be in the house. His gaze drifted, moving past the kitchen toward the door that led to the garage. The freezer, he whispered, so quietly Gina almost didn't hear him. In the garage. The big one. The chest freezer. No, Gina said. It was not a plea. It was a statement of impossible fact. No, Daniel. I know. Yes, he said, his voice firming, his plan solidifying. It's the only way. We put her in there. We lock it. And then she's gone. I can't, Gina whispered, her body starting to shake again. I won't. I'm not. Touching her. He was at her side again, his hand on her arm. But this time, his touch was not violent. It was almost intimate. It was the old Daniel, the manipulator, returning. Baby, he whispered, his voice the soft, cooing sound she once loved. Yes, you will. We will. We are in this. Together. This is our secret. This binds us. You and me. We are the only two people in the world who know that. That makes us special. He was caressing her arm now, his touch a terrible cold fire. He was not comforting her. He was seducing her. He was making this obscene, terrible act. A gesture of love. We do this. Together, he whispered, his lips near her ear, and we are free. He was right. She knew he was right. They were bound. They had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The act itself was a silent, terrible, shared nightmare. It was a visceral, physical horror, full of the weight and the stillness of what they had done. It was a violation of all things natural. They did not speak. Not once. After, they stood in the silent, dark garage. The lid was closed. Daniel clicked a heavy padlock, one he must have taken from the tool bench, into place. The sound was a final, metallic punctuation mark. They walked back into the house. They were not Daniel and Gina, the grifters. They were something new. Gina was shivering, her body shaking in violent, silent tremors. Daniel, his face pale and slick with a sweat that was not from exertion, wrapped his arms around her. His embrace was not warm. It was not loving. It was an embrace of iron, of control, of a shared, toxic, and unbreakable pact. It's "It's done," he whispered, his own voice shaking, the adrenaline finally hitting him. It's over. We're safe. We're safe. She did not cry. She just leaned against him, her body a dead weight. They stood in the dark living room of the house they had just inherited, bound together by a secret that was already beginning to freeze. The sun came up the next morning. It felt, to Gina, like an insult. The house, their new kingdom, had immediately become their prison. The silence that followed the longest night was not a silence of peace, but a thick, pressurized, watchful quiet. They were no longer two people. They were two halves of a single, terrible secret, bound together in the cold. On the first day, the house phone rang. They both froze. Daniel, his face a waxy, pale mask, stared at the machine. It was Karen, the friend. Her voice, tinny and full of concern, filled the room from the answering machine. "Monique, are you there? I'm just checking on you again. Please call me. Don't touch it," Daniel hissed, though Gina had not moved. On the third day, the smell began. It was not a product of decay. Not yet. It was a faint, sweet, chemical odor leaking from the garage. A malfunction. Something had gone wrong with the freezer's seal, or perhaps the sheer, terrible reality of their act was simply too potent to be contained. Daniel's charm was useless against this. He became a frantic, hollow-eyed maintenance man. He bought dozens of air fresheners, the cheap, pine-scented kind. He bought bags of charcoal. He bought caulk and tried, his hands shaking, to seal the garage door, to stop the smell from leaking into the house they now own. But it was a losing battle. The house was changing. It was no longer Monique's home. It was becoming a tomb, and they were the unwilling occupants. The paranoia set in. They had Monique's credit cards. They had her car. But they were too terrified to leave. Every car that slowed on the street outside was a threat. Every person who walked their dog on the sidewalk was a detective. Their own relationship, that toxic, clinging heat, had died. It was replaced by a cold, shivering, shared terror. When they touched, it was not with passion, but with the desperate, grasping need of two people drowning, pulling each other under. Their intimate moments were no longer about desire. They were frantic, joyless acts of mutual reassurance, performed in a house that smelled of pine needles and secrets. They stopped sleeping in the same bed. Gina moved to the sofa. She would watch Daniel as he stood at the curtains, peering out at the world, his body a wire of pure, unadulterated tension. We should have run," she whispered one night, into the dark, chemical-laced air. "And go where?" He snapped back, his voice, the rough, frayed sound of a man who hadn't truly slept in days. She's here. We're here. This is the plan. We just wait. We wait until she's forgotten. But as the days stretched into a week, and then two, the smell grew. It became a third person in the house. It was a constant, spoiled, sweet reminder. It was the smell of their guilt, and it was getting stronger every day. The present, the hot, unforgiving sunlight on the front lawn. Officer Hale's hand was a heavy, inescapable weight on Daniel's shoulder. "Mr. Rue, you and your wife, you are going to step outside. Onto the lawn. Now." Karen, the friend, was standing there, her face a mess of tears and dawning, righteous fury. They did something, she cried, pointing at them. I know it. Where is she?" Daniel's world had compressed to this single, terrible point. His charm was gone. His stories were gone. He was surrounded. He tried, one last time, to use the words that had once been his shield. I am a tenant. he stammered, his voice a reedy, pathetic thing. I have rights. You can't. You need a warrant. Officer Hale did not even look at him. He looked at Officer Davies. You heard him. He's not complying. He's obstructed this entire investigation. Call for backup. And call the locksmith. We're forcing entry. The word locksmith hit Daniel like a physical blow. His mind did not go to the front door. It went to the garage. It went to the cold, white chest. It went to the small, shiny padlock. The sound of the lock. No, the sound that came out of Daniel's mouth was not human. It was a high, keening animal wail of pure, distilled terror. It was a confession, louder and clearer than any spoken word. No, wait, he screamed, his body finally moving, trying to push himself back into the house, back to the garage, to guard his secret. Please, don't. I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything. Just wait. But it was too late. His eruption of panic was all the confirmation the officers needed. Hale and Davies, in one fluid motion, grabbed him. They were no longer being polite. They were officers subduing a suspect. They dragged him, fighting and screaming, away from the threshold, away from the darkness he was so desperate to protect. They pulled him onto the grass. Gina, who had been silent, simply crumpled, a puppet with her strings cut, falling to her knees on the lawn, her hands over her ears. The locksmith, a quiet man with a simple metal toolbox, walked past them. He paid the screaming man no mind. He knelt, inserted his tool, and the front door, the first barrier, clicked open with an awful, final snick. The door swung wide, and the house exhaled. The smell, which had been a faint, spoiled perfume in the open air, hit the two officers like a physical wall. It was the concentrated, pressurized odor of 2 weeks of decay, chemicals, stale air, and fear. Oh God, Davies gagged, pulling his shirt collar up over his nose. Hale, his face grim, stepped inside. "Ma'am," he called back to Karen, his voice muffled. You. Stay here. Do not come in." They stepped into the gloom. The house was a disaster. The quiet, clean home that Karen had described was gone. This was a den. Empty air freshener cans were scattered on every surface, like silver soldiers in a lost war. Plates of rotting food sat on the coffee table. The air was thick, humid, and almost unbreathable. What happened? In here, Davies whispered, his flashlight beam cutting through the dark. They stopped. Caring, Hale said, his own light moving, assessing. They were just surviving. They moved as a unit, clearing the rooms one by one. The silence was heavy, oppressive. They found the dogs, locked in a guest bathroom, weak but alive. Every step they took, the smell changed, grew stronger, sweeter. "Hale," Davies said, his voice tense. He was standing at the end of the hall. The smell. It's strongest from here. He was pointing at the door to the garage. Hale nodded, his hand on his weapon, though he knew, instinctively, that the danger here was not from the living. He put his hand on the doorknob. He pushed it open. The wave of scent that rolled out of the garage was so potent, so vile, that both men staggered back, coughing. It was the source. It was the absolute, undeniable epicenter of the horror. The garage was dark, but they could see it. It sat in the center of the space, a large white humming appliance, a chest freezer. It was wrong. A dirty, stiff tarp was draped clumsily over it, as if to hide it from view. And, Gleaming in their flashlight beams was a brand new heavy-duty padlock, securing the lid. "Hail," Davies said, his voice a strained whisper. I see it," Hale replied. His heart was a cold, heavy stone in his chest. He knew with a terrible, sick certainty exactly what was inside. He raised his radio, his voice thick. "Dispatch, we have a possible situation in the garage. We have a large, locked freezer." From outside on the lawn, a final, unearthly scream of protest. Daniel had heard. He knew. No, you can't. You have no right. That's private. That's mine. The sheer, primal terror in that voice echoed in the garage, confirming their worst fears. The locksmith is still here," Davies said, his voice shaking. "Get him," Hale commanded. The locksmith, his face pale, was brought in. He saw the freezer. He saw the padlock. He looked at the officers. He understood. He worked quickly, his hands shaking, but his tools were precise. With a final, awful snap, the padlock sprang open. Hale and Davies looked at each other. There was no more waiting. This was the end. Hale took a breath, held it, and gripped the handle of the lid. He lifted. He did not gasp. He did not cry out. He just stopped. His face, a mask of professional calm seconds before, seemed to crumble. To age 10 years, he just stared. Davies, looking over his shoulder, let out a choked, sick sound. "Oh, no. Oh, God. No." Inside, Monique was there. Hale, his hand trembling, slowly, gently, lowered the lid. He turned away, his throat working. He looked at his partner, his eyes full of a profound, terrible sadness. He raised his radio, his voice a broken, strained whisper. We have a body. Confirmed. We have Monique." The interrogation room was cold, bright. It was the absolute opposite of the dark, filthy house. Daniel was here. The panic, the screaming, the animal terror, it was all gone. He was back in his element. He was performing. He was calm, his hands folded. He looked sad, wounded. It was a brilliant story. It was plausible. It turned his monstrous act into a tragic, foolish mistake. But in another room, in another cold, bright box, Gina was alone. She had been sitting in silence for an hour. No Daniel in her ear. No charm. No threats. No heat. Just quiet. A female detective entered, sat down, and quietly pushed a bottle of water across the table. She said nothing. Gina stared at the bottle. She looked up. Her eyes were not terrified. They were empty. He told you. I was his sister. Didn't he? She whispered. The detective waited. He told you it was an accident. It was not a question. It was a statement. Gina's hands, which had been clenched in her lap, slowly uncurled. She looked at the detective, and a cold, terrible, sharp clarity was in her eyes. The pact was broken. The chain was, at last, severed. He said, I was going. Soft, she said, her voice a monotone. He liked it. He liked the game. What game, Gina? The detective asked, her voice quiet. The peace offering, Gina whispered. The tea, the concoction. The 3 drops. And then it all came out. Not in a rush, but in a cold, precise, dead flood. The jealousy, the plan, in night. The garage, the fear, the garage, the hatred. It was not a confession to save her. It was an immolation. It was the only way she could finally, truly, be free of him, by burning them both to the ground. When Daniel was told, when he heard that his perfect, tragic story had been annihilated by the one person he thought he controlled, his mask did not just crack, it shattered. The charm, the heat, the cold calculation. It all vanished, replaced by one final look of pure, unadulterated, childish rage. He had not just lost the house. He had not just lost his freedom. He had lost his subject. The heat between them, the toxic bond that had destroyed so many lives, was finally extinguished, and all that was left was the cold. Thank you for joining me on this dark, chilling journey. We have followed a path of loneliness, manipulation, and the terrible consequences of a bond built on desperation. I hope to see you again for our next story. Until then, stay safe, and be very careful who you let in.